Hello and welcome. This is the second part of a video regarding creating custom workflows in Sitefinity. The first part was about using actually activities in Windows Workflow Foundation 4.0 right inside of the web application for Sitefinity itself. In this second part, I'm going to show you how to deal with that from inside of an assembly or a class library. So let's get started. Right here in Visual Studio, I have a very simple web application for Sitefinity. I only created one page in it. And I'm going to go ahead and run it so you can see actually what this site looks like. There we go. It just says welcome to Sitefinity with the logo, and there is absolutely nothing else in this website. What I would love to do, I'd love to actually get the code that Ivan Osmek from the Telerik team in Bulgaria have put out but almost a year ago regarding the workflow. He showed a very nice little demo that will allow you to create any content, whether it's news or blogs or events, and you can actually change any of the properties. And you can say in a workflow, for instance, that whenever you see the word competitor or the word or any word you want, you can actually automatically replace it during publication to something else. For instance, if you work for a company like Microsoft and you don't want your employees to mention the word Google or Apple, you can actually write a workflow that will automatically switch to something else like the word competitor, for instance, during publication when you click on publish. So let's go ahead and use the same code, but I'm going to show you how to do that from inside of a class library instead. I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. Going to go back in here to Visual Studio 2010. You can do the same thing with Visual Studio 2011 as well. And in here in my solution, I'm going to create a brand new project. We'll say File, New Project. And I'm going to create a class library. And let's go ahead and add this to the current solution. And in this class library, let's call this one falafel.activities. Okay? We'll say OK there. So now I got myself a brand new project in here in C#. I'm going to delete the CS file. I don't need it. And now from this project, I would like to go ahead and add a new item. You will notice here on the side there will be workflow. I can create a code activity here for the workflow. We're going to create one of those. And let's go ahead and call this one, for instance, slogan. That will be my new workflow. It will be a fun one, I promise. We'll click on add in here. And now I got myself a code activity called slogan. Notice this is an abstract class. We will have to override the execute in here. And actually Visual Studio takes care of all that stuff because it's an abstract class. Alrighty. They also even give you an automatic property here for the text. It's an in argument in case you need to pass something to the workflow, which we will definitely use in this example in here. I'm going to go ahead and get the code actually from the clipboard in here from Ivan that he actually wrote for us. Very grateful for this code. It's actually a lot of fun, and I'm going to actually go ahead and add it. So let's paste it in here. And I think we're missing one more of these wiggly. There we go. And I'm going to explain a little bit of the code in here. Again, it's not very important what exactly it does as long as you understand the concept of how to get a workflow running inside of Sitefinity that is compiled inside of its own assembly. There are, of course, some things here that has the red squiggly. I'm going to need to bring in some references. Let's go ahead and add on a reference in here. This class library doesn't know anything about the Telerik Sitefinity yet, so we will have to go somewhere in here. There's the first project. I'm going to go to the bin directory, and I'm probably going to need the open access, and I'm also going to need the Telerik Sitefinity DLL, and I'm pretty much going to need also the model DLL. I know we'll need that later on. So let's go ahead and bring in the three assemblies in here to be referenced in my class library. Alright, sounds great. They're all in here now. Now when I go back to my iWorkflow item, I can actually bring in my Telerik Sitefinity in here in the users class. Let's see what else we will need to fix. Yes, the content in here as well is coming from the model, the Sitefinity model for content or generic content. And in here for L strings, I'm going to bring in the model. Did that already. The property descriptor is a .NET thing, so we'll need to bring in the system.component model. Okay, I think we're done, actually, everything else brought in. So let me show you the essence of what this code activity that I'm creating in here will do, called as slogan. So the code from Ivan, this is the most important part, of course, which is the execution, the overridden function that we will have to do. And what he has here, he figures out what is the context of the work item that is coming in. Also figures out which property you would like to actually engage this on. Let's say, for instance, we're using the blog posts. The get targeted properties, you can actually choose maybe to affect this, the title of the blog, or maybe the content of the blog, or any of the properties. You'll have to tell the workflow which property you're interested in replacing the two words with. And finally, he has a get replace items in here that you will get from the workflow, from the XAML in the workflow designer itself, which we'll see in a few seconds on how to actually use the two words, the one coming from to the one being replaced to. Alrighty. And also we'll notice here in the descriptor, we'll go through all the property types for the descriptors, whether it's a string or in Sitefinity it could also be a localized string, so it's going to look for both of them to make sure that it can replace, whether it's title localized or not, it will do that. The rest of the code is not that important, but again, it's necessary because you can actually have multiple words that will replace. So he has code in here that uses some trimming and some parsing of the text to find out whether tokens like the comma and the greater than and so on. Again, the code is available on his blog website for Sitefinity. If you look for custom workflows, Ivan Ozmak wrote all that code and it looks great. Alrighty. So that is the most important part. We created our own class called slogan in here that implements this workflow in the system. All right. The next part is that workflow requires some input. You see, these are in arguments. So it would be nice, of course, to create a designer for that will make this work for us. So let's go back to our activity, falafel activities in here. And I'm going to right click. We'll say add a new item. And this time I'm going to create a designer for it. Let's go ahead and add that. Let's call it, for instance, the slogan designer. Alrighty, you can call it whatever you want. We'll create that designer. And you will notice that Visual Studio will create automatically a Workflow Foundation 4.0 designer for you with the minimum amount of code needed to bring in all the namespaces needed for the active designer itself. All right. Again, instead of actually me dragging some text boxes and some expression text, I'm going to bring in the code that actually that Ivan actually wrote for us as well. I'm going to take part of this code and we'll paste it in here. There you go. And notice the only thing I've done in here is actually bring in some code. I'm still using my falafel activity slogan designer. And you'll notice that there is a text box here, just simple, just to show you the word content. And then there's a text box, but Ivan is using the expression text box in here. That means we will bind this text box into a workflow item itself two ways, alrighty? And we'll get it from the argument to express, like as you can see, the converter right before it in here. So this is a very, very neat way of actually binding a text box in XAML to a specific workflow item. Okay, the rest is pretty easy. Everything is a text block and a text box. As you can see here, we can bind it to the target properties. What does that mean? That means in here in the content, for instance, at runtime, I will probably need to create a workflow item in here to tell it that this is the one I'm interested in binding to. The title here can be the word title, can be content, can be any properties of blogs or news or events or whatever it is. And then finally in the replace code in here, I can say something like wrong one greater than correct one. And every time I'm going to publish a news item or a blog item that has the word wrong one, it will automatically convert it to correct one on the fly based on the code I just showed you in slogan.cs. All right, so all that code is available for you automatically from the blog. You can get it and take a look at it. Again, the essence of this video is just to show you how to get the whole assembly thing working in Sitefinity. I'm going to save all that. Let's go ahead. And before I compile, there is one more thing I need to do. I have a designer, but the class for the code activity and the designer are not mixed together. So let's go ahead and do that. The way to do this, you're going to have to actually decorate your class with an attribute called designer. So we'll come in here, we'll say designer. There you go. and we'll say type of, and we'll say slogan designer. And that's it. Once you do that, the system automatically knows that this code activity is associated with this designer that we just created as well. I'm going to save this guy, and let's go ahead and compile this entire new class library. We can compile it. We got one error. Yep, that is normal because I did not reference the system runtime serialization in 4.0. So don't forget to do that part. We'll say add a reference. I'm going to go to .NET. We'll go down to the system runtime. There you go. We'll say OK there. And I think we are now hopefully in good shape. Let's go ahead and compile one more time this entire class library. And as you can see here, it all compiled correctly and it's ready to go. Now the fun part is how can I actually use this falafel activities inside of my Sitefinity Web Application? There's two ways you can do it. I'm going to show you both ways actually. The first way is actually to create the XAMLX file inside of your Sitefinity Web Application itself. So let's go ahead and do that. First of all, as you can see probably from the part 1 of this series for the custom workflows, that if you install the SDK, and I'm going to show you what that is. If you install the SDK, for instance Sitefinity 5.0 here on my machine, it will add a directory called SDK. And in here they have a zip file that contains all the different workflows that are already embedded inside of the assemblies of Telerik Sitefinity itself. But if you would like to override them, you can open up content, you can open up resources, and you'll see there is a zip file here called default workflows. And I already unzipped it, got this default workflows directory, and all my XAMLX files for the content, for the pages, for the media, all of them are available in here. I'm more interested in this any content approval workflow. So let's copy this file, and I'm going to go in here in my Sitefinity Web Application, and let's go ahead and create a new folder in here. We'll say new folder, and we'll call this one my workflows, and I'm going to paste it right inside of here. We'll say paste this guy. All right, now I got myself a XAMLX file that comes from Sitefinity, and I can definitely open it right inside of a Sitefinity in here in Visual Studio. We'll double click on this guy. It will open up the Windows Workflow Foundation 4.0, and I'm interested in the content approval part. We'll double click on that. And like I said in part 1, it's very important to understand workflows are not about approval and rejection. A lot of people think of the workflow system is about approving and rejecting documents or content or pages. Actually, it's a lot more than that. Of course, it can be used for that, but if you use, for instance, the default workflow, that will not require any approval or rejection. That will be the normal workflow of Sitefinity working. So I don't have to do it on the 1-level approval or the 2-level approvals, and that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to double click the default workflow. You'll see there's a lot of things happening. The one I'm interested in is probably when I publish something like this. And right before I save the changes in open access, so you look for something that says fluent, check-in, publish, save changes. So right in the middle in here, I need to insert my own workflow. So let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. Notice because the falafel activities is in the same solution here in Visual Studio, I'm lucky enough that the slogan activity that I created is already available in my toolbox. So I can drag it and put it right there. If you would not have this in the same solution, you will have to actually go to the toolbox and add the assembly, and then you will be able to see the slogan. But that's the nice thing about having the whole solution opened up at the same time. And you notice what I created earlier in the designer, coming from the content, the properties that you're interested in, and the replace code will be available for you right here. All right, great. Of course, I would like to change this arrow. Instead of going from the clear expiration date automatically from the publication to the commit for the publication and save changes in open access, I'm going to change this so that it can go first by this guy, which is mine, the slogan in here. And then after that, I'm going to drag this and I'm going to move it to the execute code activity. Now I know that it cannot possibly publish or commit the publication to the database unless it passes by my own workflow in here first. See how easy that was? So let's go ahead and change it. I'm going to go to content in here, and in my content I'm going to say workflow item, And you can see here there is code completion automatically in the Windows Workflow Foundation. So that is my workflow item that's coming from Sitefinity. I can choose any property I want. In my case in here, I'm going to use it on blogs. So I'm going to choose the title of the blog itself to do this on. And we'll do something fun in here. We'll come in here and say Telerik, for instance. And whenever I say the word Telerik, it will go in and become the word falafel, for instance. Alrighty? I can also put a comma in here, and I can add another word that I would like to change. So let's go ahead and change the word deliver, for instance. And we'll make it become the word invoice. So now I have two words that will change. Telerik and deliver will be changed to falafel and invoice, for instance. Sounds good? Let's go ahead and save this. And one of the things that I always want to make sure that I do, whenever I see a XAML file in Sitefinity, I always want to change the build action from content, and I want to make it into embedded resource. That's an important piece, otherwise you get an error that is not very meaningful, so you'll be scratching your head a lot what went wrong. So I'm going to save this, and now the best thing to do is to go ahead and build this entire Sitefinity web application one more time. And it's building it. All right, it's done. And let's make sure that the reference is using, yep, falafel activities is right there. It's working correctly. We're all good. And I'm ready now to run this website and see if it works. So I'm going to go ahead and run the Sitefinity web application in my browser. Okay, there you go. Now we're going to go ahead and log into the back end. And there are a couple of things that we will need to do. First of all, let's go to administration. Let's wait for this to actually load. There you go. We're going to go to administration, and I'm going to go to settings. Remember, the assembly contains the activity, but the Sitefinity website itself contains the XAML under my my workflows. So I'm going to go click on advanced in here. We're going to go all the way down till it says workflows. And there are a lot of different workflows in here for page modes, for blog posts, for list items, news. What I would like to change the workflow for is the one coming from the blog post. And notice by default is hitting the service URL for the default workflows, any content approval workflow.xaml. If you take a look at your hard drive, there is nothing called default workflows. This is a virtual path, alrighty? So it's probably available in virtual paths here on the settings on the left side. So I'd like to change that. What happens now when I actually delete this? And I'm going to actually make it my workflows, alrighty? Now let's go ahead and say save changes. Now it's not virtual anymore. I'm actually really going to my workflows straight from the root, and I'm trying to load my own any content approval workflow.xaml file from there. We'll say save the changes. And hopefully now when I go to content, we'll say blogs. And let's see if that will work. I'm going to create a new blog engine here really quickly. We'll call this one My Blogs, and we'll select the main page, home page. It's the only page I have on this site. And we'll say go ahead and create the engine. And once this is done, I'll be able to create my first post. We'll say create a post. And if we've done our job right, folks, I can definitely go to my title and here will say Telerik is a great company. Alrighty? This is the title. It doesn't matter what I put in the content in here as long as the title has the word Telerik. Remember we said we're going to transform that into the word falafel. So let's go ahead and publish and see if this will take place actually. And look at that. The published one that all the way committed to the database says falafel is a great company. So it definitely worked. All right, great. Now I want to take it a little bit further actually. I'm going to close this down. We'll shut down Visual Studio. And what I would like to show you now is that what happens if you want your falafel activities assembly to contain the entire thing, not just the activities, but also the XAML file itself. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out from my Sitefinity Web Application, and I'm going to actually add it to my Falafel activities. We'll say paste this in here. So we know now that the web application from Sitefinity definitely does not have anything at all regarding the XAMLX file. This is all built inside of the Falafel activities. Make sure, again, because once you do that, it will change it back to content for the build action. So I need to make sure this is an embedded resource. This is a very important piece. Okay? And with this information in here, let's go ahead and compile the assembly one more time. It is successful and ready to go. I always make sure that to delete my my Falafel activities references from here and add it manually just to make sure it's not cached in Visual Studio or anything like that. There it is, Falafel activities. Now I know that the reference here contains everything, the activity and also the XAMLX file inside of here. All right, great. Let's see how this stuff now will work. I'm going to run my Sitefinity Web Application one more time. Currently, what's running in here is not going to work because there is no way to find the XAMLX file is no longer there. So I'm going to have to make a change to tell it how to get this from there. So we'll wait for this to load. And there we go. We're going to come in here. We'll say /Sitefinity. Go to the back end. And in the back end in here, I'm going to go to advanced settings for the administration. Advanced. And here, let me show you what the issue is. The issue now, when I go to workflow, you notice here it's requiring a service URL. You cannot put a control type in here. It has to be a URL. That means it has to be a tilde, which is the home root directory / something in here, whether it's virtual or not, but it has to be a URL. In my case in here, I don't have a XAMLX anywhere in my web application. So the way to do this, you have to go to the virtual path settings. And you will notice Sitefinity comes with a lot of different virtual path settings already. Alrighty? I'm going to create a new one in here. And in the virtual paths, I can do whatever I want. This is virtual, folks, so it doesn't really have to exist. You're trying to trick Sitefinity right now. So I'm going to say /, and I can actually say my name, Lino, / and I'm going to say hello.xamlx, which absolutely does not is not available anywhere on the site, but I'm actually just going to put a path like this as a virtual. And the important part is this resource location in here. So what happens about the resource location? You have to have the control type coming from the Falafel activities DLL. So in here, I'm going to say falafel.activities. That's the name of my assembly. Let's go ahead and remember exactly what we called it. It will be falafel.activities.myworkflows.app-content-approval-workflow.xamlx. That's the full path that you will need to have in there. So falafel.activities.myworkflows.any content approval workflow.xamlx. Alrighty, and that's not enough. That's just the type that you're trying to go, which is embedded as a resource in that DLL. But after that, you have to put a comma and the name of the assembly you're bringing this from. Remember that? It's falafel.activities. Alrighty, sometimes a lot of people forget this piece. I'm one of them. And that will actually try to get it from the Sitefinity resources assembly, which is, of course, not going to be found there. So make sure you pass the correct name of your assembly after the comma. Alrighty, I'm going to say save changes in here. There is one more thing also, is that you can cheat from a different virtual path. The resolver name has to be embedded resource resolver. So let me copy that from here and go back to my lino.hello.xaml. This resolver name has to be embedded resource resolver. Alrighty, and that's it. We're going to say, let me put that in the clipboard as well because I'm going to need it later. We'll say save changes on this guy. And now, when I actually go down to my workflows, I'm going to trick the workflow by saying whenever a blog post is being used as a workflow item, Instead of getting this from a service URL of an existing file, I'm going to actually paste this lino hello.xamlx file. So every time the system sees this service URL, it is virtual. What it's really going to do is going to get you the real XML XAMLX file directly from inside of the assembly of the falafel activities. Did you see the trick how that virtual pass works, folks? All right, we'll say save changes in here. Let me shut down the web server, making sure that this is the way everything is ready to go. Alrighty. The reason why I shut down the web server, because sometimes this is being cached. So I'm going to have to make sure this is actually shut down, and I can run it again from inside of Visual Studio to make sure we get a fresh new Cassini web server for testing right inside of Visual Studio. Alrighty. So we'll give it a second here to load this guy, and after that we're going to go to the Sitefinity as well. There we go. Give it a second here to refresh in here. Alrighty, I'm going to go to administration. Okay, we did this already. I'm going to go to content, and I'm going to go to blogs. And let's go ahead and create a brand new blog post in here and see if this part worked. There we go. We'll say create a new post. And there we go. Its title will be Telerik, and we'll say deliver more than expected. Sounds good? That's the slogan for Telerik. We can put whatever we want in here. I'm going to go ahead and publish this. And we are a consulting company, so we have a different slogan. So if you go take a look at what the slogan is now, it should say falafel invoice more than expected. So there we go. That worked. That's just a joke. Alrighty. All right, folks. I hope that makes sense on how to use this kind of stuff. And it's pretty easy. Excellent architecture. And thanks to Ivan Osmak for actually sharing this code with all of us. Have a great one.